Welcome, everyone. I'm Sue Paulson, your Magnificence mentor. And if you're here, you're in the right space. This is episode 4 of The Right Space. In the first 3 episodes, we talked quite a bit about the impact of writing, the impact of journaling. Today, I want to talk about the other piece that's really, really important to me, and it's about turning points. How turning points in our lives can make such an impact. First of all, what's a turning point? So I view a turning point as could be an event, it could be a person, it could be something that you read or something that was said. It could be trauma, it could be adversity, it could be tragedy, it could be the best thing that's ever happened to you. There's all kinds of ways that can result in a turning point. Life comes at us from many, many different directions, doesn't it? And if we reflect on what happened, lots of times a turning point is that pivotal moment. Maybe you turned away from something that you didn't like and turned towards something that you did. Maybe it was a big aha moment that just transformed how you thought about that from then on. So that's a turning point. Well, when I've mapped the turning points in my life, and of course, the more years you have on planet Earth, like I have, then the more turning points there are to pay attention to. Well, what's fascinated me in mapping those out or laying out the puzzle pieces of all my turning points to see what kind of a picture it formed, one of the biggest realizations I had was the magnificence of it all, of how all of those pieces interconnected, wove themselves together to form this life experience that of the life of Sue. Well, each of you has that same kind of process going on, minute by minute, day by day, week by week. It's fascinating to me when I reflect about those turning points and the difference that it made in my life. How when I wrote them down, and there's the connection, right? In writing down some of those turning points, there was a foundation, I guess, that got laid, a way for me to begin to understand in an entirely different way what was going on and why it made sense to me or why it mattered to me and so on. So let me give you a little illustration of that. So some of you may know, if you've watched some of my other videos, that I had a near-death experience in 2007. While it was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced, the most beautiful event in my life, it also was the most disturbing because it was so different from what I considered to be the real world. Well, I might have changed my mind about that. Maybe this isn't the real world. Maybe the great beyond, heaven, the hereafter, maybe that's the real world, and we're just living some kind of an illusion like they talk about on the Matrix and so on. Maybe this isn't really real. So it's a head spinner for sure. And I'm not sure if I figured it all out, but nonetheless, that particular experience was a pivotal moment for me. It was a turning point where I looked at what my life had been up to that point and decided, whoa, it's not exactly going in the direction that I had dreamed of or I had hoped for. So I began to quest for, well, how do I make it different? How do I make it better? How do I add to the good parts and learn from what wasn't so good and leave that behind? How do I let go of all of that? So I wrote about it up to the point where I had nothing more to write, and I tucked it away in my journal. We talked about journaling last week and the impact of journaling. Well, then I moved from there into just living my life until 4 years later, I got a cancer diagnosis. Oh boy, now that wasn't in the plan. That was not in my conscious awareness of how I wanted life to turn out, let me tell you. So there was a lot of shock that came from that whole thing. All of a sudden, I had to take a serious look at other parts of my life and say, oh, what am I going to do about this? How is this going to turn out? Well, of course, I didn't know. I had no clue. I wanted it to turn out with as good an ending as I possibly could, and preferably not an ending of my life, but I didn't know. So again, I lived through this. I did what was in front of me to do, and sometimes I didn't know what to do with what was in front of me, but I carried on regardless. And again, I wrote. I was trying to make sense of it as I went along, because in the back of my mind, there was this sense that there was some really good reason for this to have occurred, some gifts to be gained, some lessons to be learned. And I couldn't even imagine. Oh, I figured out the lessons pretty quickly, but I couldn't imagine what the gifts would be. So it took more years of mulling this over and thinking about it and writing some more. I read too. I grabbed onto every piece of spiritual literature that seemed to make sense to me. And it was so interesting that in a couple of places, there was reference to heaven on earth, and there was reference to magnificence, that as eternal beings, we come into this world, to planet Earth, magnificent. We just forgot, and we deliberately forgot because of because of the experience we wanted to have while we were here. So gravity took over, and the denseness that is planet Earth, that's so different from what I experienced in the spiritual realm, that it was going to be all new, and nobody could quite figure out what was going on. Let's face it, you're an infant, you don't figure out what's going on for quite a while. Even when I was 18 and thought I had it all figured out, well, now that I took many years from there, I didn't have it figured out, and I still don't have it figured out. Here I am at 73. Do I have it figured out? No. In fact, I have more questions now than I had when I was 18. But that's okay, because I don't think we stop. I don't think there is an end game here. I don't think we're ever going to be finished. I think the growth is ongoing and infinite, and the more we dive into it, the more we find, and then the more there is to find. Oh, that's a lot. Writing about it has helped me put those turning points into perspective, so that when I can remember having a moment when I was meditating at some point, and it was if all of the distinct and different pieces of this puzzle called the life of Sue fell into place, and I recognized that I had created it all, every little bit of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the unwanted, the seemingly unnecessary, the wonderful, the exciting, the breathtaking, the ecstatic, all of it, even the very ordinary mundane. I had been responsible for all of it. Well, there was a point in my life when I wouldn't have wanted to acknowledge that it was all me. It was all me doing that. I was responsible for every little bit of it, because I hung out in victim mode for quite a few years. And I didn't want to be responsible. No, it wasn't me. It was something outside of me did that. Well, I learned over time that wasn't true, that it's all about me and how I perceive things, my attitude, the way I approach life, and surround myself with what works for me. So in the writing down of that, so this realization hits me of not only how magnificent this puzzle all put together and the picture that it made, not only was it magnificent, and I was magnificent, but this was all in preparation for me creating my brand of heaven on earth. So out of survival, out of suffering, out of all the stuff that I went through for many years, that was to a large extent self-induced, into this new realm of saying, oh, well, I was going to create heaven on earth. What would that look like? Would it involve things that I enjoy to do? Would it involve happy moments? What would that involve? Who would the people be in my life that I would most want to have around me, that I would gravitate towards and they would gravitate towards me? Again, it's been interesting to document some of that by writing it down, by saying, well, this is how this would be for me. Now, obviously, as individuals, my version of heaven on earth is not necessarily going to be like yours, because you're different. You've had different experiences. You've come to a different point in time. So what you want is not necessarily what I want. And I think that's great, because guess what? You're unique. You get to create what works for you. We have free will. We can pick whatever we choose. It's and then there's the responsibility to accept the consequences of those choices. I mean, that's how it works, in my mind, at least. And so if I say, well, I want more of this, then it's up to me to bring that in, however that's going to work. Go out to work for it, or pay the money for it, or think about attracting it from a spiritual perspective, manifest it, whatever that looks like. So it's fascinating to me how this whole process, so what I was left with in the grand scheme of things was this compelling desire to spread my own message about the magnificence of each of us. How do we understand that? How do we accept it? How do we embrace it? How do we see ourselves as magnificent? How does that happen? Or what do we need to do in order to make that happen? Well, I'm still on the journey. Some days it feels as if I still have a long, long way to go. Other days I'm thinking, wow, I think I'm getting a handle of this. And what's happening in my world is evidence that I'm on the right path, that I'm making progress. Even some days, if it only feels like an inch at a time, I'm getting there. Along with that, in accepting that magnificence, well, if I could use another word that I think is maybe you'd resonate with more so than magnificence, it's self-love. The more you can learn to love and appreciate yourself, the easier it's going to be to embrace that magnificence that we are. Now, the scary part to me of magnificence is living up to it, because magnificence seems really, 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 really big. Well, there's a part of me that says, well, I'm just a little human, and how could I be that big? How indeed. Well, there's the challenge. So I'm standing up for the challenge just the same as you might want to, and to say, well, I don't know all I need to know about it, perhaps. Maybe I don't feel all that I'd like to feel in that regard at this moment. And I want to, and I feel compelled to. Of course, the other part of that is I feel very compelled to share that with those who come into my circle, to share that with the world and say, okay, who's up for this? Who wants to play? Who wants to come into this environment and try this on like a new suit of clothes? You know, who's with me on this? I don't know who you are, but I'd love to meet you. If this resonates with you, I'd love for you to engage with me, because that just makes it all the richer, right? In this exploration, in this movement towards this. The other part of that that I feel compelled to just put into people's consciousness is this idea of heaven on earth. Why wait? I mean, when I visited heaven, that place that many have written about as a near-death experience, it was so beyond wonderful. There are no human words that can describe it. But in human words, this sense of bliss, this sense of ecstasy and peace, as I'd never experienced it before, and this all-encompassing love that I hoped existed but had never felt before until then. Well, that's pretty special. Well, if it's there in the afterlife when we're no longer on planet Earth, what would be wrong with bringing that here and saying, oh, what if I could create this right here, right now? I don't want to wait, quite honestly. I would like, I had a taste of it, and then I didn't. Well, now I want more. I'm questing for more, and I'm doing what I can to pull in more and more of that, to define it for me. So what does that look like in terms of my relationships with others? What does heaven look like in terms of how I take care of my body, the food that I eat, the experiences that I have, the things that I learn, the activities that I do? Is it possible to create that for myself? Well, I think it is. And why not? Well, so I'm going to get on with it. And maybe you want to get on with it too. Maybe that's an intriguing notion out of whatever you've had happen up till now, that you say, whoa, I'd like a piece of that pie. Now your piece might be pumpkin, and yours might be strawberry rhubarb, and yours might be lemon meringue. One of my favorites is coconut cream. Well, we get to have whichever flavor we want, because it's an individual choice. Oh, well, so that's the thing about turning points. All of the turning points that I've had in my life have led me to here, right now. It's led me to being in front of you, talking about this, and it's going to lead me places I expect that I don't know yet what they're going to be like or look like, or what that's going to be. All I know is that because I've committed to reinforcing this idea of the magnificence in each of us, and I really am desirous of heaven on earth coming into my life, and of course I want that for you, then that's what some of that path is going to look like. Are there going to be pitfalls and stumbling blocks and challenges and adversities along the way? I firmly expect that, because that's part of the human experience right now. But all able to move through that. We're all able to overcome that, or rise above that, or get around that, or get it out of our way, whatever the strategy happens to be, to hit that final quest. I was talking with Chris Angel earlier, my co-creator for Turning Point Writing Academies, and he was talking about the hero's journey. Well, that's what it is. This is the hero's journey. You're the hero, I'm the hero of each of our own journeys. Well, how do we want it to turn out? Do we want a better world for ourselves and our loved ones? Do we want more than what we have? Do we want to feel compelled to engage in a bigger way, be a bigger player on a bigger stage than what we've done to this point? All choices, all up to us. Each turning point can lead us to feeling stronger and stronger and stronger about that. So the impact of turning points is huge. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Turning Point Writing Academy, this is a community that I'm co-creating with Criss Angel to invite others who resonate with the message that I want to bring to the world, who maybe feel they have their own things they want to get out into the world, and they just want to have a conversation with like-minded who say, yeah, I'm curious about how this all works and what we want to do next. I want to play in this arena or try this on or whatever. Then to be able to do that in a safe environment can be very soothing and very grounding, so that kind of like a launch pad for the next best thing we're going to do, or the next best version of ourselves that we want to be. The website for Turning Point Writing Academy is just simply www.turningpointwritingacademy.com. You'll find out a little bit more about us there. Soon, in the next couple of weeks or so, we're going to have some podcasts up there. Criss and I have recorded some podcasts, so those will be available for you to get a better sense of the community and what we're doing. In the meantime, if you want some snippets of magnificence, go to download my free app, The Magnificence Mentor. On there, if you sign up as a member, it's a free membership. It's just your name and email address and a password, I think, is all you need to put in there. When you sign up as a free member, it unlocks the 30 plus videos, short videos called Magnificence Moments. So there's a variety of topics that I've used to address things that get in the way of us feeling our own magnificence, and things that you can do to promote your own magnificence in your own mind. So that's an option. So it's like I say, it's a free download. It's called The Magnificence Mentor. In the meantime, thank you for joining The Right Space. I look forward to connecting next week. Take good care.